What's up, guys? Sub-Zero here, and look, I thought today I was going to be recording a VOD review of one of the games from the World Championship. Day 2 just wrapped up. We have our final lobby for Worlds, and I thought, it'd be really cool to do a VOD review. There's a ton of cool games that got played, but I can't. I have to do a video about this. It is absolutely necessary for me to do a video about this because everyone is going crazy about this. If you haven't heard this already, so this was the second day of the World Championship. This is what qualifies people to the final day here. And it's probably best to just start with a clip. So let's start with a clip. Before we kind of just watch the entire clip, I want to lay out just some context of the board that we're looking at right here. This is Shituren's board. This is a Chinese player. He is playing family reroll here and has, a Violet 3, a Draven 3. We have long distance pals, so we're long distance palsing the Violet 3 and the Draven 3. We also have no scout, no pivot. This Violet has been stacking up stats across the entire game, and then we're LDPing that. So, it's a really, really good setup, actually. We're only 3 HP here, and there's a bunch of other players who are really low as well. Liluo and Experion here are both 1 life, and we end up fighting Saupmi here in this spot. So this is honestly a pretty good spot. The only awkward thing is you do have your LW opposite side of this stuff. Honestly, I'm thinking that you could probably just move Victor over here and guarantee you have Sunder over here, but you also have the Urgot here, so it's kind of chill regardless. And I think most people, if you played out this spot and if Shituren had lost this fight against somebody, it would be like, okay, well, you get a 4th. This is a player who was 53 points, so there is no way of them making final lobby in this spot here. Also, this is Sen TFT's co-stream. Honestly, I think it's better with his audio, so let's just look at it here. Because look what happens here. We remove her, the Violet. We reforge her, actually, the item off Vi. A lot of people thought that this player removered it. We actually reforged it, and it becomes a Protector's Vow. The Redemption becomes a Vow, and it gets slammed here onto the Vander here. But we remove the items off the Violet, and we swap the Vi to get LDP and then put items onto the Vi here. We put Edge of Night and the Sterax here. We still actually have this Hodge on bench. The bench is a little bit buggy with the main broadcast, but Hodge is actually sitting on this bench for basically this fight. And now we slam Hodge after casting. And this fight, honestly, it looked a little not close, but as you get closer to the end of the fight, look how close this fight actually ends up being. Only 4 units alive, a lot of very, very low units. I think one could certainly make the argument, I think it's completely reasonable, that if we had our Violet here on the edge with our triple items here instead of this Vi with the long distance pals value, look what happens to the Vi in this fight, and I'll mute Send here. Shoutouts to Send for seeing this, by the way, because if he hadn't seen it, I don't know who would have seen it. But look at this. Our Vi ends up wrapping. Imagine this is our Violet here, and then our Vi is taking a lot more aggro here, CCing units. We have a Violet here who's probably a bit higher HP because, she's a stronger unit than this Violet. Getting casts off here, we'd probably kill this unit, maybe even have time to kill this Elise here. And then the Draven, the other piece is the Draven would get more stacks from the fact that we're LDPing a no scout, no pivot unit. So I think it can be said that Shituren would have won this fight had we played correctly. And I think it can also be said that there is no reason to be doing this. This doesn't make any sense. We removed items off of our stronger unit to put them onto a weaker unit. We reforged a Redemption, by the way, which ends up not looking that disgusting. Like, it ends up not looking that egregious because it ends up becoming a Vow, and we throw that over to the Vander. But imagine if we had reforged this and we'd hit like a death cap or something like that. Like, I don't really, there actually is no argument to reforging this Redemption as well. It's a very, very solid item here on the Vi as well. I know some people are like, well, we're only playing 5 Pit Fighter, but obviously we are no scout, no pivot, so we can't do anything like that. And like I said, a lot of people said that the player kept Redemption on the bench. That's not actually the case. It got reforged into a Protector's Vow. But this to me looks like a pretty egregious win trade here. And what's the angle for this player? Because as I said, Shituren, 53 points is out of the tournament in this spot. If we actually pull up the final standings here, you can see Shituren's down here, ends up 58 points. So had we, won that fight and got an extra placement out of it, we'd only be 60 points. It actually makes no difference for Shituren in this spot here. It does make a very, very big difference for another player in this lobby, because if you go to the end of this, you look over to the right here, and you see what the result of this fight was. Shituren ends up dying here down to minus 13 HP, and then Liluo loses the other fight and ends up going down here to minus 9 HP. Here, you can see at the end, and he loses to Experian here, which means that Lilo actually gained a placement here. Had this player not have, had Shaturin won this fight, if you start from the base that Shaturin would have won this fight had we not traded, if you just give that as a given, Lilo then would have gone out in 4th place. This actually ended up mattering a great deal because if you look at the final standings, there were 4 people who ended 65 points, Lilo being one of them. Iron Bog made it in clearly off tie breaks, and then Lilo, Precedent, and Les Coco, or Le Coco. Someone corrected me and said it's like Le Coco because, I guess French is a silly language. Makes sense. But Lilo, Precedent, and Le Coco ended up being at 65 points here, and Lilo won out on tie breaks. So Precedent had, Lilo been 1 point lower, Precedent and Le Coco would have been tie breaks, Precedent would have won tie breaks, Precedent would have been in the final lobby. And this is crazy. A lot of people are talking about this. You can see, Dish Soap tweeting about this. I purposely didn't win trade Precedent in the spirit of competition, where I very well could have on Final Day because it shouldn't be allowed. Hope admins take action. Precedent is, of course, very, very upset. And look at this tweet. This was posted a little over an hour ago, and it has almost 2,000 likes here. Precedent gives the context as well. Shaturin, who is already guaranteed out, removed his items from his no scout, no pivot Violet that he's had since early game and leaves 1 on bench. This is actually not correct on the leaving 1 on bench. Moves 2 items to Vi, causing him to lose this fight. Give Lilo an extra placement, bumps you out of top 8. I refuse to believe a world-class caliber player would even make a play like this. And then you see, people like Frobe, Clement, Demacian Raptor, Dasic, Weird here, Pray to RN Jesus, Grim, Impetuous Panda. Everybody is talking about this. Relic talking about this. So this is a crazy situation, and I want to talk through it all. Right now, I'm going to throw up this VOD from Mort Dog's stream because this is actually the co-stream that I was watching. And this is a VOD from the other lobby, actually, just to watch this lobby while I, put something on screen so that I have something to yap over. So these are all the facts of the situation. So the question is, what should be done in this situation? The first thing to talk about is that there is sort of like precedent for this. I've made videos about this before. If you guys haven't seen my videos about this before, there have been controversies before where Chinese players did win trade. It was Chen who win traded in a previous world championship. It was a few sets ago. What was it? Set 10, set 11? Chen win traded in that world championship and received a decent fine. I think Chen just ended up losing like his prize money from Worlds, ended up being like $5,000 or something like that. And that's all that ended up being done in that situation. But it was acknowledged that Chen had win trade in that situation. Maybe I can put like a link somewhere to my previous video if you guys want to like see that video on like the context of everything. But there is context for players being punished for win trading. And that I think is important, and I think adds something to this, which is very, very interesting. A lot of people, Pressman actually missed a stack here. I guess maybe he just wanted to make gold here of the reroll augment. Kind of interesting here. He didn't push. Oh, does he not have a? Oh, he doesn't have another 2 cost. That's why. Okay, and he just ends up making gold here. Okay, I really need to not fit. Like, I'm sorry. I like to focus on the games, but I really need to not focus on the game here because I want to look at, I want to talk about this thing. But yeah, so Chen received a fine in that situation. The kind of interesting thing is that at the highest level of play, we have never actually seen a penalty for something like this that has actually been like a kind of like rectifying the competitive issue, if that makes sense. So like if you start me from here, if I were to guess what happens here, I think the player that win traded here, and I'm bad at names here, so let's see. The Shaturen, yes. So it's Shaturen and Lilo. The player that win traded Shaturen here in this spot. I think if you had to ask me what I think Riot's going to do, what they're probably going to do is say Shaturen is getting penalized. He is losing all of his prize money from Worlds or something like that. And, that's not nothing. I think got like, actually, it's probably a little under 10. It's probably like 8K or something like that. So losing out on $8,000, it's not nothing. It is definitely a reasonable punishment, or it's definitely a sizable punishment, I guess you can say. It's definitely a punishment where, finding somebody $8,000, especially in TFT where there's no money, that is a real punishment. But is that enough? Is it enough to just punish this player? Because there's a lot of other stuff that could be done here. And I guess I want to talk through all the different options as far as penalizing players, because there is another piece to this that is Riot has over the past few months, sets, gotten harsher on punishing players, especially Riot in the Americas. So if you guys remember, there was some controversy earlier on in sets where a player actually like FF'd on ladder, and that player ended up getting banned from a cup. There have been obviously like way back in the day, it's not even that long ago, but the player who basically said they got mad at another player, and so they typed in basically that they were like, all right, I'm just gonna straight up contest you. That was Sphinxy. That player ended up receiving like a full set ban, essentially, for saying basically, I'm going to grief you in game. And so these are all examples where it seems like the punishment has actually been kind of like scaling up. Riot has said, we want to go more esports, and Riot, I think, wants to take TFT in an even further direction as far as like making the competitive scene of TFT more serious. And so if they want to do that, they have to make this game seem legitimate, right? I mean, if you have something like this that happens every set or every few sets where a player gets win traded in, a final lobby type situation like this, it's a situation where, the EV there, the difference between, Precedent getting his, I think, $11,000 for making it in 9th place versus potential $150,000 for winning the championship. I mean, obviously you can't just say that, he would have definitely won and he would have made that money, but he lost out on the possibility of making, potentially $140,000. And there's even more that goes into it in kind of like the branding, right? If you win the world championships, you get an insane amount of value in just saying like, I am a world champion. Precedent is someone who's doing pretty well. He's a full-time TFT streamer, but imagine it wasn't Precedent. Imagine it was somebody like, Dank Memes or Darth Noob, who is a player who is, not as well known as somebody like Precedent, is not, Dank Memes is actually gaining a lot of notoriety, but Darth Noob's actually like the perfect example, somebody who, really is not on a ton of people's radar. I'm pretty sure, I'm sure Darth Noob has like a 9-to-5 job. And, if you win the world championships, you can say, you know what, I have enough notoriety, I can start, maybe full-time streaming. Maybe I can start full-time streaming off of the fact that I have this notoriety from winning the world championship. That can be life-changing for somebody. And so a situation where the outcome of the world championship can be suspected to not be legitimate because somebody win traded another player, that is crazy. That is an insane allegation. And I think if you're in this situation, like, you could say, maybe you could say it wouldn't have made a difference. I think you can at least say that there was a lot of suspicion that it would have made a difference there. So you can definitely punish the player who made the swap, who made their board artificially weaker in this spot. So I think a fine's probably going to come out. And let's start with that. So I would say a fine's going to come to that player. Is it reasonable to go something further? Somebody like, if you guys remember the Shunga ban, where Shunga account chaired on NA, played a few games on an NA account, and got banned from Chinese regionals, which meant that he couldn't play at the World Championships. I think, in my opinion, and I love to hear from you guys on this, I love to hear your guys' take on this, I think what Shunga did is like, if you go from like a scale of 1 to 10 of like severity of actions here, what Shunga did in that situation was like a 5, maybe. Playing a few games on an NA account, it's not a good thing to do. You shouldn't do it. But I really don't think it's that severe at the end of the day. It's not like he was like he was playing on this account the entire set. He played a few games on an NA account. And I'm pretty sure as well, he streamed the games on the account. So you can also come from the perspective that like he didn't really know what he was doing was wrong, which I've talked about this before in a different VOD. But in this spot, actually, this player who ends up win trading in this spot, I would put this at like probably like a 9, an 8 or a 9. The only way that you can really get worse than this is, one, if it was the World Finals itself, if like this player was inting and it actually changed the winner of the World Championship, like say Dish Soap was going to win Worlds and then another player won Worlds because of win trading, that would make it worse. And the only other thing that would make it worse is if he came out and said, I am win trading, like I am doing this to help my fellow Chinese player. Those are the only two things that I think could make this any worse. And so I would put this at about an 8 or a 9 in terms of badness scale. And so if Shunga gets banned from participating in regionals, potentially banned from playing, not potentially, 100% banned from playing in the World Championships for this, then I think it is absolutely correct that this player should receive at least a set ban, potentially longer. I think a set ban is pretty reasonable. So take their World's prize money and ban them from set 14 competition in China, and obviously the World Championships as well. I think that's perfectly reasonable. And I think most people would agree with that. This cannot exist in competitive TFT. This just completely destroys the competitive integrity of TFT. And TFT is a really special game in that, special in almost a bad way, in that these things can happen, right? You never see this happen in League of Legends where, one team, SK or T1, they're called now, T1 is playing against EDG and it comes out that Faker is win trading because there's a binary outcome there. Either you win or you lose. You're always playing for the win. Not the case in TFT, right? There are very, very small changes that you can make that can adjust people's outcomes. And you want people in your region to do well. Like Dish Soap said, if he had known, if this doesn't end up going, prosecuted, I guess punished is the better way of saying it. But if this doesn't end up getting punished, then Dish Soap, I don't know why for a second I was like, is his name Dish Soap? Dish Soap could say, okay, well in the future I'll just win trade Precedent because Precedent's my dude. I care about Precedent's. I play with Precedent all year. Maybe I've studied with Precedent a little bit. I have much better relationship with Precedent than I do with Liluo. So I'm going to make it so that my fellow player who plays on my server, I'm going to make it so that they get a better placement. That is, that exists in TFT. And I think the best solution is what Dish Soap said, and what Dish Soap did is that Dish Soap certainly could have win traded and given Precedent an extra placement and just tried to place lower. This is actually the lobby that Dish Soap and Precedent were in, by the way, and Precedent ends up making a really, really close, no spoilers or anything, but he ends up making a really, really close, almost gets to top 3, but ends up going 4th. It's actually tragic that this lobby was so close because, we wouldn't even be talking this if there was no difference in the placement. But also, I think this is really, really good to talk about. So yeah, so Dish Soap, could have inted Precedent, and that's obviously the worst case world where people are just inting for each other and they are, making it so that they're putting their thumb on the scale, and the game is not about competitive integrity. It's about, whoever is, inting for another player. I think that's the worst case scenario, and I think everyone would agree with that. So how do you stop this from happening? I think one, you absolutely, like I said, you have to punish the player a lot. But then there is a second potential thing that you can do as Riot here, as the competitive ops in TFT. And it's really, really, really tough. And I've been thinking about this a lot, and I've been going back and forth on this because there is another thing that you could do. You could say, we are going to make it so Liluo, had this gone differently, Liluo would have placed 4th instead of 3rd, and Precedent would have been in the final lobby. So we're going to put Precedent into the final lobby, and we're going to put Liluo out in 9th. We're not going to harm Liluo. You definitely can't be like, Liluo, you are punished for the act of win trading, because Liluo didn't actually do anything wrong in this situation. Liluo did not say, hey, come win trade me, as far as we know. But they're playing in LAN. It would be really, really hard to do such a thing, to communicate in the middle of the game. If there was some way to know that Liluo committed, and maybe, the crazy controversy would be a few days it comes out that Liluo, sent a message or something. He opened up his phone and texted the player or something like that. But I don't think that's going to come out. I don't think that you should, we can't speculate on that in this situation. So I would say that what is most likely here is that Liluo, there's nothing that Liluo could have done. This player ended up win trading Liluo, and so you can't really take prize money away from Liluo, and you can't punish Liluo in any way. I don't think that's correct. But you could say, well, we're just going to treat the game as if this win trade did not happen. If this win trade did not happen, there is one really, really big difference here, is that Liluo would be 1 placement lower. So we're going to reduce Liluo's points by 1. And yeah, I think Precedent actually went to the bathroom in the middle of this game, which is kind of hilarious. He paused to go to the bathroom. Someone was like, is bathroom pause allowed? But I know how it is. Sometimes you're running really high, so you don't go for a bathroom break or anything like that. And then you're like, oh shit, I actually really need to go. But yeah, so that is the other thing that you could do. So yeah, you can't punish Liluo in any way, but what you could do is say, you know what, we're going to play the tournament out as if, Liluo is 1 less placement and Precedent's going to make the final lobby. And okay, here's some context for that idea. It is crazy. We've never seen something like that happen before in the history of TFT. And I think a lot of people are coming out and, well, maybe I'll say this, and I want to hear what you guys have to say about it. I think a lot of NA players obviously are saying, yeah, put Precedent into the final lobby. A lot of people who watch, America, a lot of kind of like players from the West, even a lot of European players as well, they're a lot more familiar with Precedent than Lilo. We watch Precedent stream, we root for this guy, and so like this is a situation where I think there are a lot of people who are kind of like rooting for Precedent over Lilo just because there is familiarity there. Precedent's somebody who's like near and dear to our hearts, and so you can't really completely disregard that. I know a lot of people will probably say, I mean, this is, at the end of the day, it's an issue of competitive integrity, and we should just do what is the best from a sense of competitive integrity. But I feel like it does make sense to mention that fact that there are a lot of people who probably are really, really sad that Precedent didn't make it, and they say, okay, if there's any way that Precedent can make it, honestly, they'll lean towards that because that feels better to have, an NA player. I mean, me selfishly, I'd love to have Precedent in the final lobby, though I do think it is also really, really hype for Lilo to be in the final lobby as well. But so yeah, that is one piece of it as well, is that I'm sure a lot of people are, with their hearts would prefer that Precedent would make it into the final lobby. So that's one piece of it. But yeah, the other piece of it is, what is correct in terms of competitive integrity. I think it's a really tough decision because Lilo had no say in this. If you take a placement away from Lilo, a lot of Chinese players might say, well, that's unfair. Lilo didn't actually do anything wrong. And there is another even further part of it where I'm talking about all of this from the perspective of assume that Precedent, or assume that Lilo would have, or assume that player would have won that fight if they hadn't win traded, if we had the Violet there. I think that's relatively likely, but TFT is a game where it's really, really hard, right? There are no way to say for certain. Fight RNG changes, things change, and so maybe had that player made no change in the setup, maybe they still would have lost, and maybe we'd be in the exact same spot here, but we wouldn't be talking about this. So that is a possibility, right? It's not impossible that things would have changed 0% and the fight would have been a loss anyway. So the best thing in an ideal world, what you would do is you would run like a simulation of that fight. And if there was a difference, then you could say for sure, okay, now we have this situation where we know for a fact that there was actually a difference because of that. I don't think TFT is advanced enough. I know that you can run sims. The problem is, scaling up the no scout, no pivot throughout the entire game. Like that, I think is probably really, really hard to do into a simulation like that. So yeah, it's difficult, I would say, and I don't know if it's actually like possible to feasibly do. I would assume that it's not possible. In situations like this, I think you should always assume that it's not possible because like a lot of people will be like, how hard can it be? Just run a simulation. And it's like, well, Mort Dog or someone on the Riot team will be like, it's just not possible. But yeah, here's actually the spot, so we can talk about this game. Precedent here, second place, really, really strong spot. Dish Soap lower HP. If Dish Soap just says, I'm going to start inting in this situation and I'm going to take like a fourth or something like that, then, he can give Precedent extra placements and, end up in a situation where Precedent ends up going in third here. Iron Bog ends up winning the lobby and making tiebreak here, which also, ends up changing. I mean, had Dish Soap inted for Precedent, this is where things get really crazy. Had Dish Soap inted Precedent, then Precedent would have made over Iron Bog an extra placement. And then I think Iron Bog would have not made it because he would have been one placement lower actually, and Lakoko would have made it. So like this is where like win trading, like everybody has to just play their best TFT, right? Because like if you end up in a world where Dish Soap win trades to get Precedent in, and then Iron Bog doesn't make it in because Dish Soap's win trading Precedent, then it just gets way, way, way too gross, and the game is just horrible. But yeah, this is actually a fight here where, I mean, look at this. Dish Soap beats Precedent here and kills Precedent. Had Dish Soap not done that, Precedent would have lived longer and could have potentially, look at this, Boomhay goes out in, Boomhay ends up going third this game, I believe. There is a world here where, had Dish Soap just made like a very, very small win trade on Precedent. Maybe just into his positioning a little bit. I think people talked about the fact that, actually we can go back and look at the Dish Soap Precedent fight. Maybe Dish Soap could have just allowed this Akali to wrap onto backline, just made a very, very small change in positioning and allowed Akali to wrap onto backline. Akali would have killed all his units and Precedent would have, been alive here. So yeah, I think those are all the facts that I can lay out here, and we are kind of getting towards the end of this game. So I do want to just wrap up and say, because the only thing that I haven't said really, my opinion-wise, is do I think that the finals should be played with Precedent, or do I think the finals should be played with Lilo? I mean, and I'm a biased NA player as well. I'd love to see Precedent in the final lobby as well. I guess like if you swap the placements and say, had Precedent made it in instead of Lilo, and would you swap these? Like would I say that you should swap Precedent out and put Lilo in? I want to think yes. I want to think the most fair thing to do competitive integrity wise is for Liluo to not play the final lobby and Precedent to play the final lobby, because I mean, imagine Liluo wins this world championship. There will always be an asterisk there saying, well, he won, but I mean, had a player literally not win traded, he probably wouldn't have even made the final lobby. And I think that is really bad for TFT competitive integrity. So yeah, that's my take on it. I do think they should put Precedent into the final lobby. Do I expect that to happen? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I like to think, but I mean, there's no way of knowing. So, I mean, you could certainly accuse me of bias if you want. You know, you could maybe say, oh, you know, like you're just saying that, like, if the roles were reversed, you would want Precedent to be in the final lobby. And I want to hope that no, I don't think that, and that Precedent would have actually, yeah, I would say swap Precedent out with Liluo because this is completely unfair. But I mean, there's no real way of knowing exactly. But yeah, that is the situation here. I'll pop up to the score sheet again so you can see the end situation here. Liluo, Precedent, and Lakoko and Iron Bog actually tied at 65. Crazy that but it always happens like this, right? It always happens that something like this happens and it ends up making an impact. And that's why it's really important to have set rules. I do also, I guess the last point that I should say is that you have to punish this harshly, because if you don't, then people are going to keep doing it. And that's why I think you do. That is another reason why you should put Precedent into the final lobby instead of Liluo, because while Liluo did not do this, if it's just a slap on the wrist at the end of the day and Shaturen loses, you know, what is it, $9,000, then people are going to keep doing this. Players are going to keep doing this exact thing and say, I lost $9,000, but maybe China gets another world championship because of it. Like, that's a fine trade for me. Like, I'm sure some people will say that, and this will continue to happen. So I do think rectifying it the best way that you can by kind of acting as if the win trade never happened does make it disincentivize people of doing this from the future. Because if they think, okay, you know what, the win trade is going to get rectified and I'm going to lose my prize money, then maybe they won't do it in the future. So these are my thoughts. I love hearing you guys' thoughts on this kind of stuff. It's always crazy. This is a crazy situation. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. What do you guys think should happen to Shaturen? What do you guys think should happen between Liluo and Precedent? What do you guys think about just TFT competitive integrity in general? So yeah, let me know. And thanks as always for watching. This is probably going to be my last video on the set, which is kind of crazy. This is my final set 13 video, but after this, we are moving straight into set 14 content. I am so hyped for set 14. We can talk about it more tomorrow, but yeah, thanks everybody for watching as always, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.